Hello friends, this is Himanshu Jain from the Wall Street School. We have been teaching students in investment banking for more than a decade now. Now we have been getting a lot of requests from the students asking us to make a video on the most frequently asked questions in an investment banking interview. So what we did was we analyzed and collated thousands of questions which were asked to our students. So in this video, we are going to cover those questions along with brief answers in a structured manner. Let's get started.
Hello everyone. Till now we have uploaded approximately 5 hours of content on investment banking, financial modeling and equity research. In all those videos, generally we have one common question, that is, what are the questions that could be potentially asked in an interview? So we'll be discussing that today in this video, investment banking interview questions. So let us start. First of all, I need to tell you that there could be 4 types of questions that could be asked in an interview. The first one could be technical questions, in which you could be asked questions related to accounting, financial modeling and valuations. The second type of question could be analytical question. Third type of question could be situational questions, and fourth type of question could be personal questions. In this video, just to keep it short and simple, we will be focusing on valuations related questions, and that too basics of valuation related question, right? We will be covering advanced question in the next video. So let us start. The first question that could be asked to you related to valuations could be, what's the difference between valuations and pricing? So this question will set the mood for interview. You need to tell the interviewer that only those assets that generate some cash flow could be valued. All the other assets are priced. Example of the assets that could be valued could be, say, companies, could be debt, could be projects. Example of assets that could be priced could be gold, could be Bitcoin, could be currencies. These assets are priced, right? So valuation is determined because of characteristics of an assets. Price is determined because of demand and supply in the market. I think this will answer the first question of an interview, what's the difference between valuation and pricing. Now let us move towards the next question, that is, what are the two major valuation methodologies? So you need to tell that two major valuation methodologies are intrinsic valuations and relative valuations. Within intrinsic valuation, most popular one is DCF. Along with DCF, we have dividend discount model. In relative valuation, you have public company analysis, or also called as trading comps, and you have precedent transaction analysis. These are the two major valuation methodologies used in an investment bank, right? Now let us move towards the next question, that is, which valuation methodology will give you the highest valuation? So this is kind of a tricky question. There is no definite answer for this, but in general, because of control premium involved in precedent transaction analysis, where one company acquires another company, and since they are taking control in the another company, they pay some premium, right? So because of that control premium, generally precedent transaction analysis, PTA, will give you the highest valuation, but there could not be any definite answer for this. Please keep in mind that interviewer will ask you tricky questions every now and then, and he'll evaluate you based on those answers. So let us move towards the next question now, that is, can the valuations be exact? And the answer is no, valuations can never be precise. Your growth rate assumption, your cash flows assumptions, your cost of capital assumptions, your multiple assumptions could be very different than another person. So valuations are never exact. You cannot say the valuation of this company is $100. It will always be a range. That's why in any M&A deal, you have football field prepared, right? In which you have a range that is taken out from all the valuation methodologies. So valuations can never be exact. Pricing can be exact on the contrary. If something is priced as $100 in market, it is priced at $100. So pricing is exact. Valuations are always in a range. You can give one range that the value per share could be say around $90 to $105, right? And within this range, negotiation between two parties takes place and they settle somewhere in between. If the buyer is strong, he would like to get it at a cheaper rate, so they will settle somewhere around say $90 to $94 per share. And if the seller side is strong, they would like to sell it at a higher price, so they will settle somewhere around $100 to $105, right? So valuations are always in range. Now let us move towards the next question, that is, are there any other ways to do valuation? The answer is yes. The first one could be option pricing model. The second one could be liquidation value. The third one could be replacement value. Option pricing model is very rarely used in investment banking, so please do not expect questions on this. You could be asked some questions on liquidation value and replacement value. So let us move towards the next question and let us answer, when will you use liquidation valuation technique? And the answer is when the going concern assumption of a business is disrupted, that is, the company is on verge of bankruptcy. So bankruptcy is a situation where liabilities are more than assets. So company have to dispose of its assets to pay off some liabilities, and some of the liabilities could not be paid back. So those cost is borne by equity shareholders. In that case, liquidation valuation is used. That means all the assets are sold and then the cash proceeds from those assets are used to pay back the liabilities, right? This is one more domain in investment banking where you advise companies whether it is better to sell off the entire company in one go as a sum sale, or you should sell off assets or various divisions individually, which would generate more cash flows. I think this will answer the basic question, when do you use liquidation value technique? So the answer is when the going concern is disrupted, that is, the companies have more liabilities than assets and it is on verge of bankruptcy or already have declared bankruptcy, then you don't have to project 5 years cash flows, and that company that is on verge of bankruptcy won't be getting valuations in relative to its competitors, right? All the assets that it have some value. It will dispose of those assets to pay back the liabilities. There is a particular order in which these liabilities are paid, so you don't expect questions on that on the basic level. Maybe on advanced level, question related to which debt is to be paid first will be asked in an interview, but at very basic level this is good enough. Now let us move towards the next question, that is, when it is most preferred to use DCF valuation. So the answer is when the cash flows are predictable. That is, for mature companies, it is highly recommended to use DCF valuation. For a mature company, that is a bank or that is a financial institution, you are not recommended to use DCF. In that case, you use dividend discount model. More on this later. Now let us move towards the next question, that is, list down the assumptions that you take in DCF. So DCF basically means calculating present values of future cash flows, in which you take assumptions regarding future cash flows. It could be free cash flow to firm or it could be free cash flow to equity. You take assumption regarding growth rate and you take assumption regarding discount rate, that is your WACC or cost of equity, depending upon what you have calculated. If you have calculated FCFF, you will be using WACC. If you have calculated FCFE, you will be calculating KE, that is cost of equity. Now let us move towards the next question, that is, What are the major problems with DCF valuation? Academically, DCF is very respected, but it has one major flaw, that is, it is very much impacted by its inputs. So it is very sensitive to inputs, that is the assumptions that you have taken. Especially it is sensitive to long-term growth rate and cost of equity or WACC, that is your discount rate. One more problem there with DCF is uncertainty in a calculation of terminal values, right? One more question that could be asked related to terminal value is, when you use Gordon growth model in calculation of terminal values and when you use exit multiple in calculation of your terminal values. Answer for this will be given in advanced interview questions. Now let us move towards the next question, that is, what are the shortcomings of precedent transaction analysis? So the major shortcoming that I have faced is lack of data for previous M&A in same industry of similar size and in same geography. This is the first shortcoming. And the second shortcoming is, because of lack of data, you have to move back in past, and that too I'm not talking about last 1 year, 2 year, 3 year. I'm saying in real M&A transactions you look data for last 5 years, last 7 years related to M&A. But many times these market conditions are not same. The conditions that were there past 5 years or past 7 years is not the existing condition. Therefore, it becomes little dicey to use precedent transaction analysis. A very good example for this could be, say, transaction related to e-commerce. In last 1 to 3 years, the market for e-commerce, especially in Indian market, have changed a lot. If I compare this with any transaction in say 2012 or 2013, it won't be fair because the market conditions have changed a lot. Therefore, this is the shortcoming with precedent transaction analysis. Now let us move towards the next question, and the next question is, what do you mean by multiples and why do you calculate them? So this one question involves two questions. What do you mean by multiples? The answer is, multiples are standardized measure of value. Example could be price earning multiple or EV by EBIT multiple or EV by sales multiple. Why do you calculate them? Since absolute numbers are not comparables, we need to make them comparable. And to make them comparable, we need to bring them to standard units. And those standard units are multiples. Therefore, multiples are standardized measure of value. And why we are calculating them? Because I cannot compare absolute values of companies, right? Now let us move towards the next question, that is, how do you select comparables in public company analysis? The answer is, there are 3 criteria for selection of comparable companies primarily. That is, they should be in similar geography. The comparable should be operating in similar geography, should be in similar industry, and should be of similar size. These are the filters that you need to select comparable public companies. Now let us move towards the next question, that is, what are the 2 most commonly used multiples? So the most commonly used multiples are equity multiples and enterprise value multiples. Are there any other multiples? Answer is yes, but these are the most commonly used multiples. So in equity multiple, we have PE ratio, price by book value, and in EV multiples, there could be EV by sales, EV by EBIT, there could be EV by EBITDA, there could be EV by NOPAT, there could be EV by NOPLAT, there could be EV by number of subscribers. Depending upon the industry, these are called as operating multiples, right? Now let us move towards the next question, that is, what are the advantages and disadvantages of using enterprise value multiples and equity multiples? So let us talk about advantages of equity multiples first. Firstly, it is very easily understood by retail investors. Secondly, it does not involve any assumptions of market value calculation. That is, while calculating equity multiple, in numerator you have equity value, that is market price per share multiplied by number of diluted shares outstanding. So you don't need to take any assumptions regarding market price of equity shares because all the companies are listed. So you don't have to take any assumptions. In enterprise value, the major advantage is less impacted by capital structure, because enterprise value is the value of firm, so it is not impacted by debt equity ratio. It is less impacted by accounting policy decision of comparables, because it tries to remain on top of P&L, therefore it is least impacted. The third one is enterprise value is more comprehensive than equity values, right? Because it takes into account equity shareholders, debt, preference, everyone. But there is some disadvantage also with enterprise values. So disadvantage is, in this you have to take assumptions regarding market value of providers of capital. If you are not able to understand all these terms, I understand that. Let me tell you, we cover all these things and much more things in detail in our certification in financial modeling and valuation course in detail. So if in case you are interested in that, feel free to check links in description. Now coming back to the topic, this is one major disadvantage with enterprise value, and I think disadvantages of equity value multiples are the advantages of enterprise value multiples. So all the advantages of enterprise value multiples are disadvantages of equity multiples. Now let us move towards the next question, that is, what do you mean by enterprise value and formula for EV? So enterprise value is market value of all the capital invested in business. That's it. The formula is, on a simpler level, it will be market value of equity plus market value of debt, short-term debt, long-term debt, plus market value of preferred shares, plus market value of minority interest, minus cash and cash equivalents, minus investments, minus other non-operating assets. If you want to expand the formula, you can make adjustment for unfunded pension obligation, you can make adjustment for capitalization of leases, you can make adjustment for non-operating losses. So this is the complete formula. There could be some other adjustment also, but in interview you will be mostly done with this part, right? Now let us move towards the next question, that is, what do you mean by sum of the parts method and when it is used? So what do I mean by sum of the parts method? In this method, we value individual units of company using various valuation approaches and then add them up to calculate the value of the entire company. Example could be Reliance. Reliance in itself is listed, but we don't know what's the value of Reliance Jio, which is a subsidiary of Reliance Industry. We don't know what's the value of Reliance Petrochemicals individually. We don't know what's the value of Reliance Retail. We don't know what's the value of Reliance Media Group. So what we do in sum of the parts is, since Reliance is a conglomerate, we calculate values of individual businesses and then we add it up. This is called as sum of the parts method. When it is used in case of valuation of conglomerate. Conglomerate, example could be Reliance, example could be Tata Group, example could be Birla Group. Under one umbrella, there are multiple businesses. So if I want to value the entire Birla Group, I have to take valuation for individual Birla subsidiaries of Birla Group and then I have to add it up. This is called as sum of the parts method, right? And the next question is, which valuation technique will you use, DCF or dividend discount model, while valuing banks and financial institution? And the correct answer is you will be using dividend discount model. A follow-up question to this answer could be, why would you prefer dividend discount model over DCF? Generally you prefer DCF, but in case of banks and financial institutions, you prefer DDM. Why? The answer would be, in DCF we calculate FCFF, that is free cash flow to firm or free cash flow to equity. While calculating this, you need to make adjustment for fixed capital investments and changes in working capital. This fixed capital investments in case of normal business is reinvestment in the business in relation to fixed capital. But in case of banks, this fixed capital investment need not necessarily be reinvestments into business. Therefore, we avoid using DCF and we prefer using DDM model. Another reason is changes in working capital. In case of banks, their business is heavily focused on their balance sheet. Their changes in current assets, current liabilities could highly impact these working capital changes, which would in turn impact your free cash flows to firm and free cash flows to equity. Therefore, we prefer to avoid using DCF model and we use dividend discount model. Another question could be in relation to relative valuation, which kind of multiples you use while valuing banks and financial institutions. So you don't use your normal multiples, you focus on price by book value and PE ratio while valuing banks using relative valuations, right? With this, we conclude our first part. Thank you for watching this video. I hope this video will help you to prepare for your interviews. If in case you have any comments or suggestion, please feel free to reach us in the comment section below or at thewallstreetschool.com. We are very active in the comment section as well as over the website. Thank you for watching this video. Bye-bye.